Hi, I'm Rachel Abbasi. Welcome to the Recovery Daily Podcast. As always, thanks for spending time with me. And happy snow day! I don't know what's happening. It was 85 degrees yesterday. I swear it wasn't in my imagination. Now we have an inch of snow on the ground. That's fun, right? It's fun. That's why I like Virginia because we get all kinds of weather. But I feel like the strangest weather phenomenon that I've lived through. I don't recall ever being in 85-degree weather and then it snowed the next day. The only thing that comes to mind is when I went skiing in Tahoe, and that sounds like I lived this uh, extraordinary life. No, my brother worked at a ski resort in Tahoe, so I got to go there. I didn't frequent my life. I didn't frequent these extraordinary places. However, I did end up in Tahoe and I was skiing there and I'm terrible at skiing, but on the very top of the ski resort, it's like 85 degrees, or it feels like it. The sun was like shining bright. There were no clouds in the sky. People were skiing in shorts. So there was that much snow, natural snow, and yet it was that hot outside. So that's the only time I've ever experienced anything like this. And yeah, it's beautiful though. It's beautiful to me. And I don't have to leave the house. So that's a positive thing. So, as I record, on another note, there's a strange booming sound that is happening outside of my house. I don't know what it is. I've been trying to figure it out for like 20 minutes now, and I'm like looking out the window. That's where I'm looking at, and I just can't. I'm like, is that my husband in the basement? Is somebody like chopping wood? Is somebody hunting with a gun? I can't figure out what it is. So we're just gonna ignore it. But throughout the episode, if I kind of stop and like look out the window, it's because I'm still trying to figure out what it is. But we're gonna keep going. So that is what's happening. I feel very uplifted today. I got to meet with who is known as my supervisor, and it's like she volunteered. It's a oh, you've already met her. It's Caitlin, who I interviewed in a previous episode recently. She's playing my supervisor role, so we get to talk about my episodes and how to incorporate peer recovery principles in it. Hold on one second. Autumn, stop licking your paw. Thank you. Okay. Let's see. So I met with her today and we talked about the topic that I'm going to talk about today because I wanted to see what additional like insights that she has and if I'm on track with those principles, those peer recovery principles, and if she has the same, I don't know, feedback that I have on this topic. What is this topic? I'm glad you asked. It is knowing when it's time to make a change. So I just did an episode on knowing when you are dealing with a chronic illness, chronic pain, a disability, no, making that decision like I'm tired of going to doctors, it's not helping me. It's time to say no more. I'm going to live my life. I'm tired of testing medications and all of that stuff. So that's what the previous episode was about. But what I was thinking about since that episode is how do we know in general when it's time to make a change? And that can apply to like when it's time to change jobs. I mean, that's a big one that I think lots of people struggle with. I know I've been there for sure. How when you're faced with something in your life that feels like, although I feel like I'm not happy, but sometimes that unhappiness gets comfortable and it feels more comfortable than what uncertainty feels like. So, how do we know when to stand up, when to say when? Um, Living with a vestibular disability, like I talked about in the previous episode, forcing us to make that difficult decision to leave a job, which is what I needed to come to the realization and do. And it took me 2 years. How did I get to that point? How do we know that it's time to change something in our lives, something big, something hard? And it rarely starts with a dramatic moment. Like for me, it leaving my job was a dramatic moment. It was like I reached the point where I simply could not use my eyes anymore and I shut my computer. And that was the beginning of my new life in recovery. But it doesn't always happen that way. It often comes on like with gradual awareness. And so I believe, and it's so in line with my program, like the more that I try to apply what these decision making, the more that I try to think about how to face different changes or different relationship problems or whatever we deal with on a day-to-day basis, the more that I talk about it in my podcast, the more that I can relate it all back to my sobriety program. It's quite fascinating to me. And I love talking about it because I love trying to make it go back to my sobriety program because it reiterates to me how strong and all encompassing my sobriety program is. So the first step, just like step one in when you're entering into sobriety, is simply noticing that suffering is occurring. And often I can be miserable and not exactly stop and notice it. Um, Not stop and say, okay, wait a minute, things are getting out of control. I need to stop and make a change. A lot of times I will, the banging is throwing me off. I think I realized what the banging is. There's a house that's being built 2 houses down, and I have a feeling that they're building. The last time I saw yesterday, they were building like a front porch. And I think that I have figured it out after a half an hour. So, sorry, I'm a shiny coin kind of gal. So, a lot of times I can be miserable and yet I don't stop to look at it. And it's almost like a ball rolling downhill, my suffering. It will go faster and faster and be heavier and heavier if I don't stop it early on. And what it feels like on the inside is that my anxiety gets higher and higher, and my depression gets deeper and deeper the longer I allow myself to suffer in a situation. So, all I'm doing though is not looking at it. And it's not because I'm not wanting to feel good. It's really that it's almost like what came first, the chicken or the egg? Like I feel the anxiety and the depression becomes louder than that inner voice that's telling me, Rachel, stop rolling the ball down the hill and look at what's really going on and recognize that you're suffering. How easy we can recognize that other people are suffering, you know? I can look at a friend and be like, what's going on? Something's not right. I can tell something's not right. Um, but yet I don't do that with myself. You know, I have a friend that I know well enough that after let's not exaggerate, after a minute with her, I can acknowledge whether she's having a good day or a bad day or that something's not right with her. But I can't be with myself for a minute and be able to provide that same attention and care inward. So that's the first step. The next step is just plays on that a little more as far as being able to treat ourselves the way that we would treat somebody else. You know, you hear that when you're younger too. But what I was thinking about today was when something's wrong with me, a lot of times I will just shift into self-pity and be like, well, that's what I deserve. I must have done something wrong. You know, I'm guilty. Um, But if I were to have a friend come to me and they tell me that something's wrong, there's no way in kale, as we say in this household, there's no way in kale that I would say to them, well, this is all of your fault. You deserve to be unhappy. You know, I feel sorry for you. I pity you. That's not what we do. So, recognizing our shared humanity and understanding that what is going on, the root, what is going on? Is it my illness? Is it my limitations? Is it my struggle with X, Y, and Z? Like, I'm not the only one in the world who feels that way. And I deserve self compassion. And the only way that I can give myself compassion is to notice that something's wrong. I'm not okay. Notice I'm not okay. That's all it comes down to. Like you don't have to know. I think that when I admit that I'm not okay, I feel like that should be immediately followed up with, this is why I'm not okay. Sometimes we don't know why we're not okay. And and I think that we need to give ourselves grace to sit in that space between acknowledging that I'm not okay and then finding a solution, trying to problem solve. Like there's that space in between that just allows us to be honest with ourselves and not being shameful, not being judgmental, self-judgmental, the way that we wouldn't judge other people, being honest, being understanding, and talking to ourselves the way that we would talk to somebody else. Do you ever tell somebody, can I talk to you? I have a problem, you know, and then you tell them what's going on and they immediately try to give you a solution to your problems. And you're thinking, I didn't want a solution. I just wanted to tell you what was wrong. You know, I learned in my peer recovery class about how when we listen to each other or we try to help one of our peers, it's important to say, do you want feedback or do you just want me to listen? I never, I never ask somebody what I want from them. And I was actually talking to my husband about this recently. Um, it's the same as like if you're if you're an artist and you show your art to somebody else, do you want feedback or do you want somebody to, you know, applaud your work? I think that we should go into those types of conversations sharing what our expectations are. And then reeling that back in where I'm looking at my own, you know, harshly judging myself and thinking that I have failed in some way, um, giving myself that time to acknowledge something's wrong and not necessarily needing to find a solution. Like, okay, let's just sit with what's wrong. And honestly, in my sobriety program, one of the most important parts of the sobriety program is being able to sit with yourself when you're feeling an emotion and not necessarily having a solution. And in those situations, the program gives me tools for what to do with that. Like, what do I do while I'm sitting? Well, I have the God box. I was just talking today about the God box. I have that. I have, oh, I mean, it's unlimited the amount of resources that we have as humans. We have each other, you know, recognizing once again that shared humanity. We can learn from each other. Um, and then something I was listening to a really short audio about self-compassion, and she brought up mindfulness. And to these days when I hear the word mindfulness, I get kind of like, here we go again, that word mindfulness. Like, who came up with the word mindfulness? Because I'm sick of it. I'm sick of the word mindfulness. I think that when we get introduced to terms like this, that we lose the definition of the word. We start using the word so much that we lose what it is, what it means. And so when I heard this individual say mindfulness, I thought, well, let's see if she defines what she means by mindfulness, because I think that it can take on lots of different meanings. And so what she said was exactly what I'm talking about here, which is like instead of immediately trying to fix everything, we pause and acknowledge the moment. So that is mindfulness in the way of self-compassion, like taking the pause and the time, like leveraging time and silence and breathing to say, this, I don't, I'm not okay. This is hard. And sitting in that, seeing the situation clearly, not seeing it for more than what it is and not seeing it for less than what it is. Being able to, we say in my sobriety program, right size the issue. A lot of times in the program, we're talking about right sizing ourselves out of ego. So in this situation, it's right sizing the issue at hand and seeing the situation as it is. Like recovery teaches me how to view my life in a less exaggerated way. When I was drinking, everything was everything was such a big deal, you know? And actually, sometimes I think I frustrate people because I maybe am quite the opposite now, where sometimes I underestimate the magnitude of a situation. And really, I think because I have a tendency to like my self-talk can be very shaming and harmful, and so I try to avoid that, and I think that is the way that I get out of it. The way that I get out of like over uh over what's the word? Overblowing? I can't think of the word. A situation. I avoid trying to get in that like panic mode, the anxiety and stuff. So being in the program and listening to the literature and applying situation to the steps and calling someone and talking to them like allows me to right size the situation. And sometimes it works for me to not do anything. That's where the God box comes in. Like when I'm faced with a situation, if I respond to it right away, I'm reacting instead. And I feel like sometimes even after 48 hours, I can be reactive instead of responsive. And how do I know that I've reached the point where I've been thoughtful enough about what action I'm going to take that I'm not reacting anymore, that I'm actually responding? And um, I think that it's hard to know that because what I was thinking is um, I just lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. It happens. Stroke. Doo dee doo. Let's just wait for the information to travel back to my mouth. Sometimes when I sit with something long enough and I think, okay, I'm ready to respond now, my action can still be wrong. You know, I can still react or I can still respond to somebody in a way that upsets them. And then it makes me question, well, wait, was I reacting still? I thought that I had waited long enough, but I still made them mad. Well, sometimes you're going to make some other people mad when you're putting yourself first. And it's hard to know. All of this stuff, it's like super complicated. All I can say really about that is when I've reached the point that I am accepting help, I'm willing to talk about it, I'm willing to accept support, then when I make the decision about what my action's going to be, that I know one thing for sure, and that's that I'm moving forward with dignity, you know, that I'm taking care of myself the way that I would take care of my best friend. Um, and sometimes I need to hear somebody say to me, it's okay to put yourself first. What you're doing is called self-care. And even though it's hard, you deserve to live in a way that supports your happiness. Um, so choosing that path that I feel is going to lead me out of that struggle and into, my happy path, choosing the happy path that's going to take me out of that struggle. How can that be wrong? How can that be wrong? Sometimes the bravest decision is just making one. It's not what the decision was, it's the fact that you allowed yourself to make a decision, to make a change. So I think then where we've come back to is that it's always going to be our own choice as to what's right for us when we need to make that decision to make a change. Um, I think the main message here is to ensure that when we're making the change, that we're listening to ourselves before we take any action and treat ourselves the way that we would treat somebody else and know that we deserve to be happy. I think I struggled with that for a long time. Even feeling like I deserve to be happy. I just felt like I was like a glutton for punishment. Like whenever anything bad would happen to me, um, the suffering, when I knew I was suffering, it's like I didn't go past that point where I was acknowledging, okay, this is hard and this would be hard for anyone. And it's time to make a change because I deserve a change. And um, yeah, that's where I'm at. I think that's where I'm at. I think that's where we're going to stop. So thanks for listening today and stay safe out there on the snowy roads. And I will talk to you next time.